square table. I decided to make a video finally. I've been out of pocket for a little while, but I was gonna give you some information on pottery. We were talking about pottery before, and I was gonna show you the coil method they used to use. If you heard anybody say that before about the coil method of pottery making, I'm gonna show you what I've learned that how they used to make pottery. And I have some modeling clay. I'm going to show you that and some more neat stuff. I'm going to have a certain type featured on a video called a St. Helena. It's pretty elusive to most people, but it's a Louisiana, Mississippi point, so you probably wouldn't find them in other states, but something similar maybe. Keep in mind that different states call points different things. They may be the same type and they may look the same and may be different. Depends on who found them years ago and who locations and who named them. But I have about 13 or 14 of them from a site I have on private property that is an archaic site, which I'm going to feature some more as the cool weather comes in. But I'm about to show y'all some neat stuff, and I hope you enjoy the video. Alright, when you talk about the coil method, of course the natives used to have, or the Amerindians, whoever, I'm calling them ancient people, used to have clay. They used to find clay in the creeks or wherever their source was. I know where a source is in our local creek here. I went in when I was a teenager, and we buried ourselves up to our chests in it. It's a huge deposit, and I've always maintained that that's where these people who lived here got that clay from there probably. It's a local source. But they would take it and they would mix whatever. This is just modeling clay. There's no sand or grit or grog or anything mixed with this. But what they would do is take the clay and they would roll it out into just like you did when you were in class when you were a kid playing with clay. And I'm going to show you something it's just pretty neat that most people don't know unless you studied it some. I found so much pottery, I studied it a lot. When I found so many pieces. This is probably thick to be coiling, but I'm going to show you something. I'll put the camera down, see if I can give you a good shot of what I'm talking about. Now, so if you take it and you're gonna make sure the camera is seeing this, and they would roll it around into a coil just like this, probably different thicknesses, and they would make it stick together because their clay was wet, and they would make a coil. And I've seen a piece like this fired. It was in a museum where it was just a coil like this fired and found at a site. So what they do is press it out, I'm saying. You'd end up with something like this. Look, and then they would add another coil to it. I've never done this before, actually. Just showing it on the video is the first time I've ever actually did it with clay. I use this clay for making molds to make casts of arrowheads. I make silicone molds, and I pour liquid plastic and make arrowhead copies of my arrowheads. I'll have to show you that in another video. That's a pretty cool thing too. So just basically, that's pretty. They were better at it than me. Then they would take and add a piece here and keep going around and around, and they'd make the coil bigger and bigger, and then they would mold it from there. Now a lot of these pieces I find, I'll show you. So say for instance that right there, flatten it out, get the joint, get it to stick together, and they would smooth it from there. See how it's coming apart. they would have to mush it together, and then once they started, they would make the bowl from there on out, just similar to this. Okay, so they would talking about the coil method and how they coiled the piece of pottery into these coil lines. They would take a rock similar to this I found on site B. It's a rub rock, something like this, and they would flatten it out, probably with their hands, and just so you can see the refinement of the method. Say you press it all together, and of course they did the same thing. They would move it, or press it rather, and get the coils to stick together. You know, the temper and the sand and everything else would help it be stronger. And they might take a rock similar to this and smooth it, you know, flattening it out, or a piece of wood, something, where they would smooth it. But that's pretty much where I was headed with telling you how it was done. You take the piece and roll it up, and you can see the coil lines in this. It's just like I was showing you on the old piece. You can see the coil lines. Well, they smooth it out when it's good and wet. They can smooth it out with a lot smoother with that rock or a piece of wood, a smaller rock, maybe one like this, you know, like a smoothing rock. But different ways. I've never actually done it enough to really, I know the methods that they did use, but I've never physically done it to prove which ones are the best. But I know this clay is not wet. So if you sit there, used to play with mud when you were a kid, everybody's done that once or twice when they would try to make a bowl out of a bunch of mud. They'd mix up playing. But then they would bend and mold it and form up a pot with that method. And I will show you what the result was. I've showed you before, but I'll find it again. You'd end up with this, and as you can see, the coil lines going across this on the older piece, and then here's where they were drilling the hole in it. You go from one side and match it up on there, but this same, it end up with a hole in it like this. Pretty interesting stuff. If you're finding pottery and wonder about it and how it's made, and these lips, they used to call that wrapped over. They would form it and bend it over and wrap it, and you can see the lines there too. But they would smooth this out better than that most of the time. Most of the pieces you find don't have the coil lines in them this pronounced. But something else just cool to look at. 3,000-year-old piece of pottery with the coil lines in it. And a refined piece. Like this. A decorated piece with the markings in it, a fine rim, Marksville period rim, with the holes in it and the markings on it. So they work it out, and through the different methods, all this is made through the coil method, and you can see on this one how it's smoother, but you can still see the lap over here on the top edge. If I can get the light on it, you'll see how this is, the lip is rolled over. It's a rolled over lip. But that's what I was going to show you, adding to the rest of the stuff I showed you. It'd be a lot better than what I'm showing you here. But just for the video, I'll show you that's the coil method of making pottery. Now, take that same instance, and I'm going to show you these two pieces here. The light is on them, which is good because you can see you can see the coils in this ancient pottery. You know, this piece here, this is an old piece. It's probably 25 or 3,000 years old, and it shows the lines. If you can see those lines, let's see if I can make the camera wake up so I can see it in the pottery. And you can see the coil lines from this ancient pottery where they failed to smooth it out. These two pieces go together. I found these recently, but it's just a pretty neat thing looking at what I just did and showing you the coils from their pottery 3,000 years ago that they failed to smooth out. It gives you an idea what I was just showing you. And that is, of course, a rim sherd. Now when you go finding pieces to reconstruct, and I have a lot of them, I've learned sorting these things out. Here's a good one right here. When I find a piece and there's no rim on it, it's hard to tell where it goes. The first thing you have to do is find out what side's up. So you take a piece similar to this and you look at the contour. You know the inside from the outside. That's the first thing you find out. This piece here, for instance, this is a big giant one I found with those other rims. Got some marks on it from roots hitting it and rubbing it around. But you can tell by the contour of it and by the texture. This is the outside, this is the inside, but which way is up? North, south, up or down, whatever you call it. Now, first thing you need to do, if you're looking at this piece, the coil, with the coil method, the coils usually go horizontal, not vertical. The paddle marks go vertical. So if you find a piece that's got coil marks on it, you can tell what's left and right. So when you find a piece like that, even if they're smooth as this one is, I've determined that this piece goes up or down. So you go putting pieces together and you say, well, I don't know which way's up. So if you can determine, if you can find a coil mark on there, which is what I did on this, I'd have to really look and see with a magnifying glass, but you can find a coil line going horizontal and determine which way's up. And I mark them with an arrow. So when I go back to rebuild them later, that answer will be on that piece of pottery already. Here's another one. See, I marked up. I put the little arrow on that knowing that that was up. A lot of these pieces I will refit while I'm down there. If I find them, I'll fit them before I even leave, and I'll mark them the same day for fitting. If I find them and they're broken, they came out of the same hole instantly, I'll take them and fit them and mark them. But a lot of the pieces break on incision lines. I'll show you that too. You take these pieces that have a lot of lines like these here across the rims, and then you come down and there's another line. All these incisions they make in here are almost like scoring a piece of wood. The marked pieces are obvious what's up and down on those most of the time, and the straight line breaks mean there was another line down here. It probably broke on another line. The incisions made it weaker, although they didn't know that at the time. But most of the pieces you find are broke on the line or an incision. Alright, so there's your one pottery lesson of the day. Now, we were talking about on the last video different things, and I didn't take these out of the cases, but I'll give you an idea now that I got a light. Well, there goes that one. That was a good piece to break. Wasn't glued very good. Take this piece. This piece, I'm getting the light and you can see it. This is a X stamped pottery. This goes across the southeast. It's got a cool pattern on it. It's overlapped, but they used to have like a cane mat, something like that. That's the one I was showing you. It's more of a Coles Creek. It's not as old as the others, and when I say it's not as old, it's not 3,000 years old. It's probably just 2,000 years old, which is still old. But this goes across the east, Florida to Georgia to South Carolina, and has 3 or 4 different names, but the same general pattern. If you can see that good with the light on it, that's what I'm trying to achieve. You shine the light on it to get the carving or the marks to stand out more. The shadow line makes it pop so you can see it. This is what I call a Pontchartrain check stamped. It's very well tempered. It's found on April 4th of '08. Let's see, I wrote that on there. Okay, it's a very hard piece. Got a cool. They probably had a cane mat made when it was wet. They laid this pot on it, or laid the mat on the pot, pressed in on it, made this incision, or they had this mark on there, cane marked or whatever. Pontchartrain check stamped. Now, coming back to these other ones, I have one over here that was called LaSalle incised, and I identified it wrong. This one comes from the Marksville time also, although it's very well tempered and harder than some of those chula pieces or funky pieces. The early pottery was fragile. They didn't know how to do it yet. As they went through the centuries, they learned how to make it better and better. But I was thinking this was, I read the book wrong, and I'll show you. This is called, goes back to the Marksville time frame, so it's probably 1000 BC, something like that. I was thinking it was 1000 AD, or back over to 500 AD something. But that's a big time frame mistake I made when I was reading the book and checking it out. It's older piece than I thought. So I'm running into it. It makes sense to me because most of the pottery I'm finding in my place is Marksville and some Coles Creek. So mine is, I'm finding older stuff there, which makes sense. And then but I do find Mississippian arrowheads and newer stuff there. It's a multicultural site where people lived there through the centuries. Bayou Gula and Collins and arrowheads and atlatl points. But those are nice pieces. This goes with it too, and you can see the marks. I'll talk about the decorations in another video, and the elements, decorations, motifs, all these different things. Now, point type of the video is St. Helena, and I'm going to show these. I'll take them out of here, but I don't want to drop them. But you can see, let me show you the first one I ever found. When we used to go to archaeological society meetings, we joined clubs and studied. We were studying things we found. We'd want to know. We had a few people that used to get together, about 10 people locally, discuss things they found. I found this in 1988 in the watermelon patch. And we used to call them double notches. I saw one double notch, and this one had 3 notches in it. And we were saying, wow, that's really rare, because it's not a double notch, it's a triple notch. Nobody called it a St. Helena at the time. Studying goes on, and they rearrange their thoughts. It's a chisel tip point. This is the 3rd or 4th arrowhead I ever found in my life when I was about 19. And there's a chisel tip point. Now everybody, of course, at the meetings and all these theories come out from everybody. Oh, it's ceremonial. They used to open oysters with it. They take it and worship with it or whatever. I think it looks like a fish. I almost say it's an effigy. But that's just me saying that too. All those are just guesses. I had an archaeologist tell me one time that if an archaeologist says something is ceremonial, that means he doesn't know what it is. And the archaeologist told me that. So, and that makes sense. It's they don't know what they worshipped, how they worshipped. They worshipped food, I think, because they were surviving. To mark a spot, I don't know why they'd leave an effigy of a fish next to the creek, because they all knew there was fish in the creek. It wasn't like they didn't know. It had some kind of purpose, and it could have just been a knifed edge arrowhead. Atlatl point. It's pretty sharp. But that comes from my archaic site, and it's not the only one I have. I can't remember. I remember this one being my fourth one, but this one my brother found. This is a nice one, very nice one. I teased him about confiscating it, but I'm going to give it back to him. I need to. This one is another one, St. Helena. It's got a bigger, fatter edge on it. They have wide bases. These points are probably chronological 6500 BC, I'm going to say. I think that's right. I'll double check that and post it in the video. There's an Evans in here. This is an Evans. Saying 5000 BC. This is a heartbreaker Evans here. If you look at it, tip is broke off of it by the disc, and beautiful point. If it had the tip, it'd be like just a smoker killer. I'm calling each one of these broke. See, I know these are St. Helena's and they're broke, but each one of these is a different point. I call these points. Now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 whole St. Helena's, and these are St. Helena's too. So I call these, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. That's why I say I have 14 of them. I know they're St. Helena's because they can be ID'd by their bases and their marks. This one's on almost bifurcated, a bifurcated piece, if you call it that. Edit that out. But they're not the most. This one my brother found is like the finest one, I guess, if you call them crude. But all of them on crooked rocks. This one is a nice piece, but it was on a crooked rock, and I found it broke, and I put it back together, and it's on a twisty rock with a cortex dent in it, and it's kind of weird to be twisty, but I'm not sure why they would complete it in such a manner, but pretty sure it fits. But the double notches, see, that's a double notch. This is a double notch. These are triples. Here's a 1, 2, 3 notch, similar to the St. Tammany's, but the St. Tammany's are more of a heavy serrated side notch. 1, 2, 3. This is almost a 4-notched one. This one's a double notch. Here's a long, almost a Fort Payne shirt looking one. Really, thinking about it, it's triple notch, no tip, no tip. But these wide bases on here, they come with these wide bases, which is typical of archaic stuff. But throwing this out here just as a type point, a point type of the video, St. Helena. We'll talk about another kind in another video. I hope y'all enjoyed this one, and we'll see if we can keep you up to date on different things. I have a lot of pottery to show you and different things. I showed in the last one me drilling the hole in this piece here with the drill. That was something here's another neat piece. This is a piece of charcoal wood that came out of the ground about 30 inches deep, and that's another good question you can leave in the comments if you know. Me and my friend discussed it. How come wood and bone usually are non-existent in these digs, but ancient wood and charcoal are there? And if you know the answer, type it in. For some reason you can find charcoal, but you can't find bone in this acidic soil, and you usually don't. And of course wood gets eaten. Wood, leather, anything like that, organic, gets eaten up by bugs and rot over time, but charcoal remains. Another neat thing I'll leave you with, I was deer hunting one day and I stepped on something, and I looked down and it was this. I dug it out. It was a Mano stone. Nicest one I've ever, only one I've ever found. Something to leave you with. But how do they do it? How do they make pottery? The Coil Method. I'll have some pictures in here of different things along the way to try to help us understand it and study it more. Leave me a comment below, like and subscribe if you like it and are entertained by it, and we'll get back to you. Have a good one.